Take me back.
Let me pass. You are being violent.
Take me back. Yes, let me be, because I've had enough patience.
Let me
No
pass.
other woman
Let me pass.
It is not very often that husbands battered by their wives open up to family members, let alone to an unknown third party. But the survivors in this story chose to seek help. In order to protect the identity of the children of the survivors, most of whom are minors, the two men who have suffered domestic violence allegedly inflicted by their partners have spoken on condition of anonymity. Survivor A began living with his now estranged partner in 1999.
You see, the unavailability of money was a major reason why all these things came out. I don't think they would have come out if I had remained where I was working. Maybe when I retired, maybe it would have come out. But the fact that it came out the way it did was because I didn't have any more money before. Things were so bad for me that even 100 naira was a problem at a point. Just to buy fuel into my car, then fuel was still like, we still buy 100 naira fuel, then not now. So then I would need money to go back to the cyber cafe to just do one more brand to see if I could get a proposal into one company, hoping they would invite me to do training. So I would go to a post and actually steal money from them. Money that somebody else gave her. Which she just using to feed the baby. So I would promise, sometimes I used to be able to return the money. But sometimes if I didn't return it, it would be a real bashing, barbaric. So I took the money, I couldn't pay it back. She wanted money for something, I couldn't give her money. So as we were talking in the sitting room, she just slapped me. I said, are you crazy? Why did you start? I slapped her back. As I slapped her back, next thing I had on my head was blood. I just saw blood.
Survivor A describes his wife as vicious, who in her meanness had many times in the past instigated their children against him to the point of violence.
Oh, they did something wrong. I can't remember now. They were rude to me or something. I was trying to discipline them. I wasn't even flogging them. But I told them to lie down. I was talking to them. But they just, when they just got up, it was like they planned it. So they asked, but they were punching, they were like, I was just pushing them off like flies, you know. It was, what's wrong with you guys? And they were coming back at me. And the mother just stood smiling. I was looking. So eventually, as I was trying to, they would rescue me to the ground, I would get up, it's my kids now. So I was trying to get up, and I just saw through the side of my eye, I saw the mother come behind me. And as I was trying to obtain my balance, she just pulled my leg from the back, and I fell over backwards. And I said, man. She now went outside, she was smiling.
Survivor B fingers his estranged partner for taking their 6-year-old daughter to witch doctors many times for yet unknown fetish aims.
And the reason I went to the police station is because before then, my child had explained to me about her taking her. My daughter's old enough to speak now, freely. She's 6. Taking her to a place where they put live catfish on her head. They killed the live catfish, and the blood they put on her head, her hands, and her legs. I took my child to church as well to go and pray, to deliver her from whatever they had done. People always say evidence of a child should not be admissible. But she did that the second time. This time to a different place, it's a fetish person's place. I feared for my life, even I fear for my life now saying this. This time they killed the catfish on her head. Hands and legs, no different from the first time, but they went further. Put it on her belly button, and she was given the blood to consume.
Survivor B here says by reasons of divine restraint, he never married his partner, whom he also accuses of physical violence. He is convinced that he may have been under a spell cast by her.
I remember that I was called for a contract. I was very happy. I could have earned close to 5 million naira a month. I stopped by her place. That's the mistake I did. She cursed and said anything I go for will not work. And on our way driving, this has never happened before. How can a pipe inside the engine that supplies the engine just come off? And the floor started leaking. So I saw the floor gauge going down. I opened the bonnet to check everything, but because it was dry, I didn't say anything. So I told my friend who happened to be in the car to put on the engine. And the more you start the car, the more the thing will just fly up. and I had to look for a way to fix it. We didn't have enough fuel to get us where we're going to, and I didn't have cash with me, so we turned back. The next day, the contract was cancelled. I went to a place another time. After cursing and cursing, I had a write-off accident, but God always saves me, no matter how fishy she gets.
Women are believed to be the weaker sex, and as a result require the love and protection of their men. But when men suffer in the face of violence inflicted by their partners and are docile in the face of it, one is wont to ask why.
Remember I was watching football that day, and she stood in front of the TV and said I couldn't watch. So I just sat down there. The next thing she came, she pushed me, and I fell back flat. My head hit the ground. I just held onto my head and I stood up, and I moved to another chair. I guess at that point in time, a lot of people would have reacted, but I did not react. So, not reacting, she decided to slap me the first time, and I just did not do anything. The second time, I still did not do anything. The third time, I had no other choice but to hit her back. You know how it is? It's not when a dog bites that the story goes round, but it's when a man bites a dog that the story goes round. And immediately she started telling everybody that I beat her up. 9 times out of 10, I will never even touch her if she did all those things. I'll just get up, tell her, see what you're doing, then I'll go out. She will laugh at me. I'll go out. I entered the car. I was crying as I was going. Like I said, I went to a place I parked under a tree, and I was just crying. So I looked at her and said, I need to report to somebody. So I just went. I think I waited till the next one because I typed that thing. I went to a business center and I typed a letter. Okay. I said to the DPO, and I told them how she had also, previously injured me, and I said I believe that I was not safe. And please, when she did this thing, she was pregnant. When she did all this, what I'm talking about. So I told her, I said she's pregnant. Imagine what she did if she's not pregnant. So the police officers sent for her. They actually came and invited her. And then they gave her a stern warning that they did not want to hear of her causing any more disturbance in the compound.
Experts have identified intimate partner violence to be about the tendency of one spouse to wield control over the other.
In this instance, the men. You find out that their confidence, it erodes, you understand, it erodes their confidence. It makes them to be, they just feel, this self-guilt. Is it that I have not, I did not do well? Is it that I have not, did I miss out something? So the self-guilt, the self-blame begins to play out. And we find out that anxiety also sets in. They begin to live in fear. They begin to live in, oftentimes the post-traumatic, stress disorder is set in. You find out that then they begin to be so much, they become so dependent on the abuser. You find out that they are giving in. It affects everything about them. Their confidence is taken away. Oftentimes, they are shaky, they are fearful, lack of trust. You find out that even their sleep is disturbed. Who do I talk to? They are troubled. And with depression that is not well handled, it leads to suicidal thoughts. They contemplate what's the use of being alive. For some of them that have handled, they got to that peak.
I'm thinking that if I were not as strong as I am, I would have committed suicide now.
The Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Unit, Titilola Viva Adeniyi, says it is also about patriarchy.
That is, power and control is the underlying factor. What you see on top of it is an offshoot of that. So you have patriarchy. Patriarchy is everybody's enemy. Patriarchy is not just an enemy of women. It's the fact that, you know, one gender is superior to the other, and a gender here now, the boy or the man, is not able to express himself. So that even when he's feeling abused, if his spouse is abusing him physically, emotionally, or otherwise, patriarchy, shame, the society will not allow him to come and speak out, right? So that's a major problem. And patriarchy is not just peculiar to us here. It's a global phenomenon. It may be worse here because we have our social, cultural norms, and of course there are religious factors that must be considered. But it is a problem, and the way patriarchy discourages or subjugates women, it also discourages men who are experiencing violence from speaking up, speaking out, and getting help. I think gradually we're breaking the silence.
Survivor A sought help from the DSVRT. How did his quest turn out?
I have told this to Mrs. Vivo. I told her bluntly about the man at Kosofia office. Many of them are doing very, very naughty things. I went to complain. They are telling me I should pay for your phone call because you made phone call to call somebody I came to complain about. You do it first time, I ignore you. You do it second time, and then when I now give you her phone number, you say you call her, and then you start attacking me on the phone when I call you to ask how far. And then you slam the phone on me. That's one. Two, they're always talking about maintenance. And I told her, what am I maintaining? Am I maintaining a car? They will never focus on solving the problem. They are very interested in channeling you to begin to come and put money down that you begin to give to her that you are using to take care of the family. Told them.
The Executive Secretary of the DSVRT responds to the allegations of gender bias and levity leveled against welfare officers under her unit.
I know that there's no system that is perfect, right? But I think that we need feedback to improve on our services. I know that social welfare's mandate is the welfare, access, maintenance of the children. And perhaps that is what the social welfare officer was focused on, right? In terms of handling the domestic violence, because that is criminal, it's a criminal allegation. That's the brief of the police. The social welfare is for children.
The oldest child was living with my parents at a point, and he attacked me right in their home on behalf of his mom, to the extent that he injured me, and I had to go to the hospital. So that was why I had to do the second police report. I went to the police station, those ones were making fun of me and collecting money from me. Let me put it like this. In their own case, they were lucky because they tricked me. That's what I was saying. I'm saying it without apology. They tricked me. They gave me the impression that it was kind of a procedure. Equally, if not, I know I'm giving them one kobo. So, I'm going to deal with this. This is very bad. This is a lie. They did nothing. All they did was get money off me and then started playing around with me. Isheri. Oh, those one even told me, oh God, the way you are talking, you look like someone that will beat his wife.
Survivor B said he found himself on the wrong side of the law when his estranged partner leveled false accusations against him.
She ran down to gender. This time, to claim that I was abusing my daughter. Abuse was I was fiddling with her private part, probably sleeping with her. I wake up in the morning with an erection, and I walk around all morning with that erection, with my daughter seeing that. This was just a day after the transformation was served. I cried because I knew the implication of this. I could have been remanded, detained. When I gave up myself, I went to gender because I was invited, but I went with a lawyer because they said don't go without a lawyer. So I went with a lawyer, and before I read anything, I was asked to sit down in a position where they could block me from leaving. And they said, first of all... Did you go with a lawyer? Yes, I went with a lawyer. Okay. First of all, their boss had asked that I should be detained.
Do these survivors feel that society denied them justice out of gender bias?
There's on the same human rights department, but for children's protection. But when all they were bothered about was my daughter is not of age to be, because I actually wanted custody of my daughter. They said she was not of age. They were bothered about not of age more than absconding my daughter and taking my daughter through different sacrifices. Lord knows whether they want to use her for money ritual or anything. I don't know, and I cannot confirm. And that was my position. But nobody listened. They only were talking about, you can't take her away from her mother, she's too young.
Look, for 1 year I was going to that social welfare. They will call her, she refused to come. For 1 year, the man eventually told me, Mr. Stabo, there's nothing we can do. She won't come. I think they see more opportunity for themselves in helping women.
When contacted for comments on this report, the Nigerian police authorities in Lagos appealed for time before they could respond. Survivor A's wife refused all entreaties for a formal, on-the-record interview, but off-record, she insisted that her ex precipitated whatever transpired between them.
If he thinks he put a wife that is stupid and big inside the house, I will not do anything.
Did you pour hot water on him? Did you inflict injury on him? Did you cut his hand and then he was bleeding all over?
All those things, he should tell you, he just tell you the BBC. He should tell you what he did and why it was done to him. He should not just come and be telling one-sided story.
In his own case, Survivor B was so afraid of the repercussions of involving his ex-lover because, according to him, she would take the fallout of the narration on their child who happens to be in her custody. In Lagos State, the Domestic Violence and Response Unit has in 2021 so far treated 69 cases of domestic violence reported by men, a huge reduction from the numbers turned in for 2020. As part of efforts to combat the rising cases of domestic violence, the Lagos State government has begun reviewing its Protection Against Domestic Violence law enacted in 2007. There are agitations that it should be brought in line with the Violence Against Persons and Prohibitions Act, VAP, which criminalizes violence against persons, whereas the Domestic Violence Law of Lagos State protects the rights of persons in cases of domestic violence. The Lagos State Protection Against Domestic Violence law criminalizes domestic violence by up to 3 years in prison. Many more men may be suffering domestic violence at the hands of abusive women, but would choose silence because of society's expectations, but even more so because of the agonizing and costly justice system. Amid all these, the stark reality is this: intimate partner violence knows no gender, and ultimately, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Bukola Samuel Wemimo, Channels Television News.